Okay. Everybody's popping in.
Perfect. Nice.
Awesome. For everybody on, we're going to get started shortly, guys. Just waiting for everybody to come in.
Okay. Wow.
Good stuff.
Okay. Give it one more minute and then we'll start it. So. Okay, I'm going to start now, guys. All right. So first, I want to welcome everybody, all the agents and brokers of RMA and from Broker One as well. Today we have over 300 people in attendance who've registered for this very important webinar. Um, as everybody knows, the industry is going through a lot of change. RMA and Broker One, we're going through a lot of change ourselves. So the regulatory oversight is increasing, and brokers need to be more aware of how their roles are evolving in this environment. So today, we've been fortunate to secure Antoinette Leung from FISRA for our webinar. Antoinette will introduce herself to her and her role very shortly. In addition to Antoinette, we're going to be joined by David Usby, representing RMA Ontario Southwest, Rich Spence, President of Mortgage Center Canada, and Manny Thakar. Manny is the manager of compliance for RMA, and Manny will be leading the question and answer format with Antoinette. So Manny, over to you now, man.
Thanks, Ron. And yeah, this is pretty cool that we can share. We've gone to meetings, myself and Ron, at the FISRA head office with Antoinette, and Jenny Hodgson. As some of you may know, you guys probably took the course with her, the agent course or the broker course. Now, a little bit of housekeeping, guys. If there's any questions you guys have, they're going to be possibly taken at the end, the relevant ones, but please put them in the chat. We're not going to be taking live questions that way, but from the chat, we'll pick and choose some questions. If we have time to answer, Antoinette will go through those. And welcome, Antoinette. Thank you for being with us. Really appreciate you taking your time out to speak to us and our team. If you could tell us a little bit about, who is FISRA and what your role is there.
Sure, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. So FISRA is a consumer protection agency. And you probably know that we regulate the financial services sectors in Ontario, other than the securities market. So we have a big mandate. We regulate insurance companies, loan and trust corporation, credit unions, as well as the mortgage brokering sector. So overall, we regulate, over 100,000 firms and individuals. So just in the mortgage brokering sector, we had about 1,500 firms and 18,000 individuals. So in terms of what I do here, I head up the financial institutions and mortgage brokering conduct team. So I'm within the market conduct area, and my portfolio covers uh, mortgage brokering sector, obviously, credit unions, and loan and trust. So I like to see my team as coaches for the sector. So we're not enforcement. Obviously, we work very closely with our enforcement colleagues. So as Ron and Manesh mentioned, we started actually have regular meetings with our larger firms. Is to open the dialogue to be able to share things that we're seeing, things that we may be concerned about, or problems that we're seeing. We hope through these regular dialogues, we can solve the problems together, because ultimately, we are focusing on consumer protection. And as a brokerage, you are focusing on helping consumers. So we do have alignment. So we hope that conversations is going to help us together solve problems and serve our consumers better, and be able to really, enhance and strengthen the reputation of the sector.
Awesome, thank you. And what do you specifically do, Antoinette, in your role at FISRA?
So my team is primarily responsible for supervision. So what it means is that our primary activities are conducting examinations of brokerages, as well as looking at just generally monitoring the markets, understanding how brokerages activities could be, impacted by the environment. We also work very closely with our policy area. So sometimes we may see issues that are sector wide. In those cases, we may be working with our policy colleagues to put out guidance so that it is a consistent message across across the whole sector. So is it helpful if I talk about some of the recent initiative, or do you have specific question first?
No, you can, if that's something that you want to get into, you can talk about some of the recent initiatives. And also, I want to, not everybody is 21 years old like I am. A lot of the RMA brokers have been with us for a long time, and we remember fiscal. And my question was, how are you guys different? How is FISRA different from fiscal?
Absolutely. I'm going to take that question first, and then we can talk about initiative later on.
Perfect.
I would say that there are two primary differences. One is how we're being funded, and secondly is our approach to regulation. So first, on how we're being funded, we are self-funded at the moment, which means that we all our activities are being funded by the sector we regulate, which is the fees that we collect from you. And which is different in the past, because in the past, fiscal was part of the government, so they get an allocation. Um, because we are funded directly by the sector, we're very mindful that, we need to find that balance in charging a fee that is reasonable and using our fee to tackle the most difficult problems and the most impactful problems. We obviously cannot be solving all problems. Otherwise, your fees is going to go up substantially. So we're very mindful of that. The second thing is that our approach to regulation is different. Um, I think maybe a better word is we've evolved. So it's not a 180-degree change, but definitely we have evolved. You have regularly heard FISRA said that we are very principle based and outcome focused. So what does it mean? I would say that there are four things that hopefully you're noticing the difference. One is we're definitely more consumer centric and outcome focused. So our activities are very much focused on protecting the rights and interests of consumers. And we that is our North Star. Everything that we do is focusing on that. And as I said earlier, your mandate or your business is helping consumers. So hopefully there should be some alignment there. The second thing that we're doing is we're very risk based, allocating resources on the most uh, impactful problems that are impacting consumers just because we have limited resources. The third thing that you notice we're going to really emphasize is where we want to be very transparent. So we want to communicate our requirements and our expectations, and we will engage in dialogue regularly when we see that there may be misunderstanding of what we are looking for. And lastly, we strive to be collaborative, and collaborative really mean that we are engaging with both our regulated sectors as well as the consumers, so that when we are looking at how we approach regulation or supervision, we actually understand the business of the sector so that we're tackling the right problem. And in some cases, we will be seeking your feedback as well. One of the questions that I get asked all the time, even with my from my staff, is why are we collaborative with people who are bad actors? So my first response was, it is about engagement. And sometimes people make mistake because they don't understand the requirements. It is one off, it is not intentional. In those cases, I think as a regulator, we do have a responsibility to work with those who want to comply, but because of circumstances, they didn't. Right. So we need by and regularly engaging with the sector, I think it helps us better in identifying who are the people who want to comply, but we're having difficulty. So those are the ones that we want to take on the coaching role. And who are the ones who are deliberately ignoring requirements? And those are the ones where you're going to see us work closely with our enforcement colleagues.
That's a great answer, and I can actually speak to that. That the difference, with FISRA and the new regime coming in, we never saw fiscal. It wasn't a thing to see a fiscal rep or anything like that. It wasn't. It was very hands off, and we had the feeling as brokers and management that it wasn't collaborative. It was just kind of you didn't really understand what's going on the front line. And now we have a totally different feeling. You guys are willing to meet with us, listen to us, real circumstances, and all the rest of it. So we appreciate that from our end.
Okay.
What challenges are you guys facing in the mortgage brokering space, and how are you guys looking to overcome the problems?
Yeah, so I think challenges often tie to what's our objectives, right? So maybe I'll start with that. Um, because I've mentioned a few times now that we're very consumer centric. So the what we are looking for the sector to achieve are really consumers who are dealing with you, are getting the mortgage recommendations that are suitable to them, and they actually understand the features, the risks, as well as the impact of that product that they're getting into. So that's really is the outcome that we are striving to achieve for the consumers. And stemming from that, I think the challenges, for us is equally the challenges for the sector. Few things that come to mind. I mean, the current economic environment is not news for any of us. Mortgages are still not affordable despite a slight decline in interest rate. Many consumers are still struggling. And obviously, the current environment also introduced a lot of uncertainty to the real estate market, which means consumers are relying more on this sector to get that right product. And because they're relying more, they are also expecting more from you. The second thing that, from a challenge perspective, is really the nature of the clients who are dealing with this sector. They are more vulnerable. So we have done a few consumer research ourselves, and it's quite consistent that this sector, among all the sectors that we regulate, have consumers that are moderate to high vulnerability. So, uh, when we talk about vulnerability, we really look at a few things, right? Is their financial capability, their resilience, as well as health and life events. So it does suggest, based on our survey results, that the consumers who deal with mortgage brokers are generally more vulnerable. So, which means that they're more challenging for you to serve. And I think the last thing that I noticed that present challenge for us is that the sector is still young. As Minesh said, you're only 21, so I'm assuming the rest of the audience are also very young, right? It is a very young sector, so there's a lot of firms and individuals. They just don't have a mature or consistent practices to serve their clients. So what it means is that consumers are getting different experience, and because they're getting different experience, um, they may have very inconsistent expectations, right? So and on top of that, if it is a young sector, um, that could also means that many people have not experienced dealing with difficult situations, um, such as a downturn in the market, which we're experiencing now, or even complicated mortgage transactions that could lead to client complaints. Because as we all know, clients like to think clients like to believe what they think is right, as opposed to what's actually happened. So that create a lot of challenge, and it impacts the reputation of the sector. So I think those are the main challenges for us as regulator, as well as for the sector.
Awesome. Now in current events, I guess, well, kind of current event, a past event, uh, RMA was in the news recently for a compliance matter, and the matter's been settled. However, there was fraud committed by a broker that was with us, and that was brought to FISRA's attention by a lender. Why is fraud prevention and detection so important right now?
Yeah, so I think, for all of us, it is about protecting the consumers and the reputation of the sector, right? So, in the environment of, more very difficult to qualify for a mortgage, we do expect to see documentation fraud um, happening more often, even though we haven't seen it in the news as much, but it's definitely was in the news a couple of years ago. And this, a lot of people may say, well, why does it matter? Many of these clients ultimately are able to pay the mortgage, so what's the big deal? The reality is that lenders are spending a lot of money investigating these fraud. So ultimately, all of us are paying for it, right? Consumers are paying for the cost that lenders have to incur to investigate fraud. And other than documentation fraud, we're also there's also title fraud going on, where a fraudster steals a homeowner's identity and then try to sell the home or mortgage that property. Clearly, in this situation, consumers are being harmed. So this was one of the reasons why, under our legislation, there is a specific prohibition for the sector to provide falsified information or facilitating fraud. So last year we've issued final guidance. It is actually a revised guidance from the past, to provide additional information to help the sector do what they can to prevent and detect fraud. And a lot of these, I am sure many of you are already doing, but we're just emphasizing it so that together we can help clients. We talked about verifying documents. So, not just getting a piece of document, but also confirming if information are consistent across multiple documents. We talk about, following up on actual and potential falsified documents, and immediately reporting those to, the principal broker at the firm, or another person that they designate to be dealing with these type of issues. verifying identities, checking multiple sources of valid government IDs. This is going to be very much in line with new AML requirements that come out from FinTrack. And lastly, if there are red flags, just make sure you follow up on it. When in doubt, talk to your broker, your brokerage, talk to your principal brokers.
Absolutely. Now, with regards to the investigation, just to go down the rabbit hole a little bit, as RMA, we cooperated fully with the investigation, and there was reference to the lack of record keeping, which was specifically about the inability to access and provide email communication between the client and the broker. So what is FSRA's expectations of a broker firm having copies of email communication on mortgage transactions?
So our expectation is that each broker and agent, as well as the brokerage, they should be maintaining records so that they can support the mortgage recommendations to their clients and be able to demonstrate that they are complying with legislative requirements. I know some of you had heard me use the term reperformance standard. I always go back to, that is something that I learned as an auditor many, many years ago. And the key thing is that there should be enough record or notes in the file. In this case, if you are using email as your means of communicating and interacting with your clients and email, there should be enough in that so that somebody who are not involved in the transaction can know clearly what is your recommendation. Why are you making that recommendation? What are the key things that you noted about this client situation that caused you to make that recommendation? So this is not just about proving compliance or meeting the requirements of the regulator. This is about you being able to defend yourself if late 2 years later, or maybe even 6 months later, our clients come back and say, why are you putting me in this mortgage? Or if they file an E&O claim, your E&O insurers come back and ask you, show me why you make this recommendation. And if you have that record, it's much easier for you to justify your recommendation. So that is really critical.
Now, to clarify, is this specifically for RMA to capture email and communications, or is this an industry-wide policy?
This is an industry-wide policy. RMA is probably not the first brokerage who have said that, we try our best, and other brokerages are saying the same thing. So we are doing a few things to really reinforce the importance of maintaining documentation. So we're now after the pandemic, so we have started doing examinations again. So that is a way for us to go and visit licensed firms, talk to principal brokers, talk to broker and agents, and that is a way for us to really reinforce the idea that you need to keep records, because we're going to be checking compliance, and you should be able to demonstrate to us what documents you're keeping in your files, whether it is email, it could be notes, it could be recording, to show us that you're complying with the requirements. And the second thing that we're doing is that in various guidance that we're putting out, we're also emphasizing the importance of documentation. A good example is that early in the spring, we finalized our mortgage product suitability guidance. And you will recall that one of the key things we emphasize is documentation. So we're using all sorts of forums we can to emphasize the importance of documentation.
To increase, so at RMA, what we are doing is implementing making it mandatory for every agent to use a technology that captures email communication between themselves and the clients. Now, we're putting that right into our policies and procedures as a way to speed up the process, make it less manual, and make it easier on everybody. Now, in the future, if we follow the rules of email capture, and if a broker or agent does not follow the rules, and they do not go on a technology and they do not capture their emails, where would the guilt fall if there's an offending agent or broker, something comes up, an issue comes up, and we cannot produce the emails, communication between the clients and the agents, brokers, where would the guilt fall?
So it is very case specific, right? But ultimately, brokerages and principal brokers are legally accountable to take steps to ensure compliance of their licensed individuals. So some of the steps that we expect, which you're already doing, is establishing your internal process and guidelines. We are also expecting brokerages to implement process to supervise their licensed individuals. So and also correcting any non-compliance with internal processes and regulation or misconduct. So one of the things that that is critical for a principal broker to be able to do that is for licensed individuals to keep records. So we're very encouraged to hear that RMA is putting in place process to require their licensed individuals to maintain sufficient records, because without that records, as I said, clients may complain and you don't have things to go back on. And principal broker, when you are doing supervision, there is nothing for you to look at to be able to supervise. So in cases where a broker or an agent doesn't maintain sufficient record, as I said, we do expect principal broker to take corrective actions. If a principal broker finds that a licensed individual are unwilling to correct non-compliant behavior, you will hear sometimes people will say that they are ungovernable. We do expect a principal broker to terminate the sponsorship of that individual. And there is also requirement for brokerages and PB to report individuals who are unsuitable for license to FISRA. So all of this is really for the sector and FISRA to work together to maintain the reputation of this sector and get the bad actors out.
Now, to be clear, when you say it would be the brokerage's responsibility to terminate if that agent or broker is not complying with the compliance requirements and the need for keeping communications, that would be terminate with cause, correct?
That is going to be your own brokerage policies and procedure.
Okay.
And we won't be saying is it with cost, without cost, is your own internal process. But regardless whether you're terminating with cost or without cost, there is an obligation for principal broker to report that to us. And we do look at every single report and look into what was the issue that is causing that termination. We do reach out back to principal broker to get more details.
Okay, thank you. And so we know what we're doing in terms of mandating technology that captures emails in an effort to gather communication documents at the broker's level. We know that's not happening at every mortgage brokerage right now. So my question is, what is FISRA going to be doing to kind of move it along and make more brokerages fall in line and become compliant with what's required?
Yeah, like as I said before, I think the most important thing is be there, have the dialogue, conduct examinations, because if somebody don't maintain records, I think there's going to be a lot of non-compliance. There's going to be issue because there's no way for us to verify if they are complying with requirements. So they will be getting a letter from us identifying the deficiency. And obviously, we're going to continue to emphasize the importance of maintaining records, whether it is, in webinars like this or speaking engagements, as well as when we are putting out guidance.
Okay. Now, recently we put into place a new policy, and this came out of a recent meeting we had with you guys at the head office. Now, for a private loan, for a private investor, we discussed the fact that, sometimes they want to proceed without an appraisal, And at RMA's level, we have them list that in the disclosure, the investor disclosure, as well as we made our own form, an appraisal waiver form. Now, when we brought these things up, he said it's not enough. We have to provide some sort of valuation. So we agreed that at least we have to provide and document that we provided, at least at a minimum, a purview report or a House Sigma report to the investor prior to them lending the money. What's the kind of what was the thought behind this and why we need to do this?
So, a credible appraisal or evidence of value is going to provide important information to an investor, right? It is about the risk of the mortgage investment. I don't need to tell this audience, but everybody knows that a property that is highly leveraged with a high loan to value ratio, obviously that mortgage investment is going to be more risky and it's not going to be suitable for all investors. That was one of the reasons that was a key reason why our legislation requires brokers to provide an appraisal, or if there is no appraisal done in the last 12 months, to give other form of evidence of value. So, under the legislation, there's actually no exemption available to brokers to offer an investor a waiver. So even an investor waive that, it is still an obligation under law for a broker and agent to provide that evidence of value.
Okay, awesome. Now, I know we had a long discussion in your guys' office about product suitability and that becoming the forefront. And, that kind of ties into everything you've already said about consumer protection, ensuring that we're selecting the correct product. What are your expectations in terms of us ensuring that the product that we select is suitable for the borrowers?
Thank you. Thank you for raising that topic. That is a very, very initiative of ours. So we expect brokers and agents to recommend a product that is suitable to a client's specific needs and circumstances. So what we like to see, and for brokers and agents to demonstrate that they've taken steps to know their client. They obviously need to know the product that they are recommending or considering. And we like to see the sector really assessing options and making a recommendation that is suitable. And they should be able to explain why they make that recommendation and then have it documented. And for brokerages and principal brokers, we do expect them to supervise their brokers and agents to make sure that they are in fact recommending suitable products. Now, as we know that more and more consumers have to rely on private mortgages, so in those circumstances, we are expecting more due diligence. So, if you can't remember everything, I would say that remember three things if you're recommending a private mortgage. You should be able to explain to your client why there is no lower cost option, and you should be able to demonstrate that that private mortgage you're recommending is still affordable and sustainable over the term for that client. And is there an exit strategy, and what is the risk if your client doesn't follow through with that exit strategy? Now, I am fully aware that sometimes a client is going to insist on a exit strategy that you as professional know is completely unrealistic. And you obviously cannot force a client to take your advice. In those situations, to protect yourself, I would encourage you to have a discussion with your client as to why their exit strategy is not realistic and document that conversation. I know some brokers would even take the extra step of having the client, initial to signal that, the client have acknowledged that they have that conversation. So, take a look at our mortgage product suitability guidance. It is on our website. It has a lot more details as tips that you can think about when you are making that recommendation. And we have also had a webinar about that guidance, and the recording is on our website as well.
Awesome. Are there any other industry-wide items that is the focus of FISRA going forward?
Yes, there's a couple of things, and thank you for just asking this open-ended question and allow me to speak to a few things that we are doing. One initiative that is it's a long-term strategy for us, which is just raising the standard and the reputation of this sector. So, with this long-term strategy, we are doing a couple of things. One is generally getting our brokerages and principal brokers, especially of our larger firms, to be really good at, as gatekeeper of the sector. What it means is that they play a very important role in recruiting the right people, training the right people. So large brokerage is a huge focus for us going forward. What we're doing with large brokerages is a few things. We've recently, actually this week, finalized our guidance for brokerages and principal brokers on our expectation on how they should be ensuring compliance of their licensed individuals. That is intended to support brokerages and principal brokers in doing the job, in recruiting the right people and training them. The other thing that we're doing to support brokerages is is really through examination, so that it's a forum for us to engage and help them with identifying maybe weaknesses that they can address. Part of this is because of how large the sector is. We do need to rely on principal brokers to work with us to ensure compliance. If we don't do that, I think everybody's fees is going to go up. So we do rely on them. And one of the things that I do want everyone to hear is that you know being sponsored by a brokerage is not a right, right? It is a privilege. So your brokerage and your principal broker invests a lot of the time and effort to put in place processes, to give you the technology, and to support you through ongoing training to help you serve your clients. So take advantage of those technology and those resources. Ultimately, if if you are not using the tools that's offered to you and there's an issue, you are equally liable to non-compliance. So treat them as your partners. Don't treat them as just an admin function or as your back office support. Couple of other things that I do want to mention is that we just finished the last continuing education cycle. So we are starting the next 2-year cycle, for 24 to 26. Keep in mind that the number of continuing education hours will increase for the next cycle. So for agents, you are going to have to complete 18 hours of continuing ed, and for brokers, you have to complete 20 hours. The new requirement is that there are going to be a conduct component as well as a professional component. So conduct continuing education component would need to cover topics that FISRA identified as mandatory, and we will be communicating that in the near future. Professional conduct continuing ed requirements are up to you. It is intended to help you do your job. We are also going to put out additional guidance on what type of professional continuing ed credits would be acceptable. So keep an eye out for those. So want to, give you a head start. I know we are all busy. We always like to leave things last minute. But if you are already doing professional continuing ed, and if those could meet our requirements, keep track of those, right? Because when we spot check, you already have that record. And then
Awesome.
the last thing I want to mention is that we will be conducting a APR blitz later this year. So the intention is for us to look at how the sector is calculating and disclosing cost of borrowing to their clients. We see this as really, really important. In the past year, I think over 60% of the transactions that we reviewed have understated annual percentage rate of borrowings. And some of those transactions, the APRs are substantially understated. So this is very, very critical, especially for consumers who are in private mortgages who generally have, higher fees, right? So we're commencing later this year on a compliance split. So we're going to be looking at a number of brokerages and a larger number of transactions in each of those brokerages in terms of how they are calculating and disclosing cost of borrowing. So I encourage all of you to work with your brokers and work with your PB, so brokerage, to really get a good understanding on what are the fees that need to be included in the cost of borrowing. So I would say that those are our key focus.
Awesome. Now, couple questions. What what's actually the size of FISRA? How many employees does FISRA have? I know this is a trivia, but maybe you know.
Yeah, we have about 500 employees because of the number of sectors that we regulate, as well as the number of firms and individuals. But yeah, so it may be 500, but I think some of you have heard that my the team is really small. My team is really small. We have about 25 people, so we are targeting the most significant problems, and we do work very closely with the large brokerage, and being able to be part of this webinar is it's one way for us to get our message out uh, to let the sector know what are the key items that we are concerned about, the things that we're focused on.
Sure, awesome. Okay, so I have a couple questions here. You're okay for a time, Antoinette, if I go through
Yes,
those?
absolutely.
Okay, awesome. So, somebody was asking that, this email communication and communication between, agent and clients is a requirement of brokerages. Now, does that also trickle to banks and trust companies?
So we are not banking regulators, uh, but because of the years of working in with a regulator, yeah, I can pretty say for sure that all regulated entities will be required to keep records. That it is impossible for a company and an individual to say to the regulator that I am complying with requirement ABCD when there's no records out there. So I think it's fair to say that the mortgage brokering sector may be a little bit behind, just because as we know, this is the younger sector. Our legislation is still young relative to other, like the Bank Act or the Insurance Act. So record keeping is an expectation.
Yep, makes sense. Now, in terms of the private mortgages, um, taking an alternate source of valuation, whether it be a House Sigma or a Purview, we had a question that would a realtor's letter of opinion qualify as that type of valuation? Now, before you answer, I'll give my kind of interpretation of it. A lot of these lenders or investors themselves are realtors. So the only way that I would even consider accepting it is if it's a third party arm's length realtor providing that letter of opinion. What do you think?
So um, I I think at a minimum it has to be a third party opinion, and I would ask all of you to think about whether that opinion might be conflicted, right? Because as we all know, many of us have dealt with realtors. They always like to tell you how how nice that property is, how it should be valued, and would encourage buyers to put in offers that is generally at the top of their spending range. So, so just keep in mind that they may be conflicted, even though it may be coming from a third party, non arm's length realtor. So I think the most important thing is that as a broker, if you are making a recommendation on a mortgage investment, uh, and keep in mind that there is no guarantee to the value of the investment in today's market when there is a lot of uncertainty. You don't want to put somebody in a mortgage with a property valuation of X, and 2 months later that property valuation went down, and your clients come back and ask you what's going on, because their loan to value ratio has gone up to 90% from 80%. So it is about getting a objective, fair valuation. That's really it's really support the risk level of that mortgage investment.
Yeah, makes sense. And I know there's a few questions that are specific to these, how we're doing private mortgages. Guys, we could take it offline. You guys can contact me personally on that stuff when it comes to valuation, all the rest of it. Now, there is a question about, is there a specific press release or a link where it states about the email capture being implemented industry-wide or communication capture?
Well, maybe I can point you to the act itself.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the act have specific requirement about keeping records, right? So the nature of the record that you need to maintain is going to be dependent on how you interact with your clients. So we are not prescriptive that it must be email, but if you are doing business and communicating with your clients on email, then you should retain that email. If you are doing business over the phone or just in person, then notes after the fact would be helpful. I know some brokerages may actually do phone recording if it is like a central hub. That would be sufficient too. But the most important thing is maintaining that. I'm actually trying to find that section of the act that requires record keeping, and maybe I'll find it later. I'll
yeah, that's
share it
okay. You
with
don't have to
yeah.
do it live.
Yeah.
So there was another question that's interesting because, and we see these sometimes when people put people in private mortgage situations, they can't actually afford the payments. However, it's buying time for them to sell the home. Okay, so we're, capitalizing the mortgage payments, the interest payments for a specific amount of time. What is your guys' position on a situation like that?
So our focus is that that mortgage should be affordable over the term of that mortgage. So using your scenario, somebody is getting a bridge so that they can get the home in order and sell it. The key thing is that maybe 6 months, right? It may be a very short term arrangement, 6 months. Then over that 6 months term, the client should be able to pay uh, that the interest and the repayment in that 6 months period. So that's really it is the focus. In this situation, yes, if it is a 5-year mortgage, that person won't be able to afford it. That's not the point. The point is that this you're putting them financing for a specific purpose. It is short term. It is really over that short term. The client should be able be to afford it. What we don't want to see is someone make the arrangement for that 6 months, and then the client already cannot make the payments in a month's time, or there is no interest reserve that would being put aside to support that.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So that's, those are the scenarios what you're speaking about if, you get into a mortgage and right away in the first month or two, you're already having missed payments.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Awesome. And I think I didn't put this in the email that I sent you initially, Antoinette, but I think for everybody's attendance on here, you were going to give us a 50% discount on FSRA fees next year. Was that correct? You're giving us a coupon?
Well, if you really want race to the bottom for the whole sector because we don't have enough to regulate, sure, but it's not good for any of us, I'm sure.
Just checking.
I
You could charge other
regularly,
brokerages double, to make up for us. It's no problem.
well, I'll let you negotiate that deal.
Okay, no problem.
Hey, Antoinette, that section you were looking for is section 46 of the regulation, 188.08, right? So, but
I
in record
will,
capture,
that you are probably right.
that's okay.
I,
That's all good.
so I know I'm not,
Probably.
I
What do you mean
can't
probably?
recite section. I can recite section. I know that's a test. I can
That's okay.
recite section. I can tell you what's in it.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So yeah, that's what it is. But it covers all aspects of record keeping and capturing record keeping, regardless of the nature of information. It's just our world is now email and soon to be more text messaging as well. So we'll have to deal with that component as we move forward as well. So
Yeah.
um,
So
great.
focus on whether somebody else can really reperform your rationale and your transaction,
Yes.
right? Because that to me is an easy test, because the question is always, how much do I keep and how little can I keep?
Yes, of course,
Okay.
of course. Yep. Antoinette, thank you so much for this. We've had about 275 people attend the session, and I'm sure they got lots out of it. I got lots out of it. So we appreciate all of this. And Manny, thank you very much for a great job of emceeing the event, if you will. Right. So thanks. If
Thank you
there's
for
no other
having.
questions, yeah, you're quite welcome, and you're quite welcome to come back at any point in time as well. So thanks everybody for joining us.
Happy to come back and have my team participate as well.
Awesome.
Great. Will we see you in Montreal?
Yes.
Yes. Great. I'll see you then.
Thank
See you
you.
there. All
All
Have a
right,
right.
good
guys.
day.
Tamara, thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
guys.